Welcome back. The Commission of Inquiry into State Capture will this morning hear testimony from former NPA head Mxolisi Nxasana. Nxasana left his position as NPA boss after a 17.3 million rand settlement with former President Jacob Zuma. He will be appearing for the second time at the Commission. During his first appearance at the Commission, Nxasana testified about the political and external interference at the Public Prosecution's Office. Now to talk to us more about what to expect in terms of the testimony today is my colleague Manqoba. His testimony last time had to be cut short because the legal representation of Manqoba Mchunu was complaining that their client would be prejudiced. So what has happened to allow this second testimony to occur?
Well, of course, as you recall that, his testimony was really cut short. That's because he had been delving into the issue of Manqoba Mchunu. But of course, prior to that, he had been speaking about the alleged interference at the NPA. Of course, he's not the first witness to make such allegations. You recall that, of course, the former Hawks head of the KZN branch of Hawks, Johan Boysens, has also given testimony to that effect that there was some sort of capture within the NPA as well as the security
Justice has also
system.
said they got access to documents that they weren't
Certainly.
supposed
So
to.
we've heard such testimony that there was some sort of capture at the NPA, and of course Mxolisi Nxasana himself, having worked as the former boss of the NPA, saying that there was direct political interference at that office insofar as some of the decision making was involved in that office. And he says that of course Manqoba Mchunu was among those who was at the forefront of trying to really frustrate some of the cases that had been going on. We remember the testimony of Johan Boysen, for example, on how charges were drawn up against him for investigating a Durban businessman, Toshin Pandey. And he says that, this was at the behest of Manqoba Mchunu, who he says at the time that she was among a cabal of prosecutors at the NPA that had been really involved in trying to formulate charges and vilify those who had been fighting corruption at the time. So that's exactly what Nxasana testified the last time, to the effect that, Manqoba Mchunu at some point even ran a campaign to try and get rid of him, to try and dig some dirt on him in order to try and get him out of that office. And he says that, of course, this included the fact that, people were hired to go to his house at Umlazi to try and find some information on him. And he says that he was informed also by some other prosecutors of this plan. Let's take a listen to what he had to say last time.
Mr. Chupe refers to, he says that Colonel Mhlongo also told him that Mr. Stanley Kumete, who's the regional magistrate in Durban, was the person who was considered for the position before myself. But that Advocate Jiba ran the campaign to discredit him. And one of the things in that affidavit that Chupe alleges is that Jiba then they convinced one advocate, they call him a Kosi, in Durban to complain about the manner in which Mr. Kumete had treated her in court. As a result, Mr. Kumete had to face a lot of complaints, and he was investigated by the Magistrates Commission. The matter was all over the media, and the president that precipitated the president not considering him as the candidate.
Of course, that's just a clip, but just based on the entirety of his testimony, the legal representatives of Manqoba Mchunu protested.
Of course, yes. We saw after lunch that day in June, the advocate Vuyani Ngalwana, who represented Manqoba Mchunu, bulging into the room and saying that, they were going to stop Nxasana from continuing with testimony implicating Chiba. And of course, this was based on the technicality with regards to the process of the commission itself. Because once somebody is going to be implicated in evidence, the commission will have to give a notice to the implicated persons, notifying them that they will be implicated by this particular person that will be giving evidence. And so in this case, the commission itself had given that notice a bit late. And so it had not, met its requirements in so far as the duration in which that notice has to be given. So they used that technicality to try and block the evidence. But further, Ngalwana also questioning the timing of this evidence. We know that Nxasana had been called by the commission, had been called particularly by the judge to come and give testimony. He was not scheduled, or nor did he ask to come and give testimony on that particular day. But Ngalwana really questioning the timing, saying that why did he come at this particular point? Is this to try and prejudice Jiba, who's going to know, as we know, going to face a parliamentary process to decide her future?
We know happens tomorrow.
That happens tomorrow.
Yeah.
We know that, of course, she was fired by the president earlier on this year after that commission by Justice Mokgoro found her not fit to hold office. So he really questioned the timing to say, how could you call this witness to testify, and this witness then implicates Nomgcobo Jiba? Isn't this trying to somehow influence the process that's going to take place in Parliament? But let's take a listen to what his argument was at that time.
It is the timing of the evidence. The concern is that the president has relieved Ms. Jiba of her duties as the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions. But that decision still needs to be considered by the National Assembly. Now there's a debate about whether the National Assembly needs to approve the president's decision, or it's simply a rubber stamp. I haven't studied that, but it certainly has to be considered by the National Assembly. And so the fear is that any evidence that implicates Ms. Jiba without her having been given prior notice may color those considerations by members of the National Assembly. We don't know yet when the National Assembly will consider this.
So just in an effort to connect the dots, Manqoba, the Deputy Chief Justice last week refusing Nomgcobo Jiba to cross-examine Angelo Agrisi and saying we'll postpone that indefinitely. Could it be tied to the fact that there have been other witnesses who have implicated Nomgcobo Jiba?
Well, of course, but I think more importantly, Nomgcobo Jiba herself, might need to come and testify at the commission. And I think if she wants to do that, only then may she be allowed to actually cross-examine other witnesses. So I think really, if she wants her side of the story to be heard, she'll have to make an application to the commission to come as a witness to clarify matters, or either to really give testimony. And I think it's based on those grounds that this particular request by her was not approved by the Deputy Chief Justice in this instance. But of course, we do know that there's still a lot of questions she has to answer. There's been many allegations that have been made against her, but she hasn't really shown or indicated at all if she wants to be giving testimony here at the State Capture Commission. Yeah.
Tomorrow is a year since the State Capture Commission started its work. As a person who's been covering the story, do you get a sense that there's any momentum? Are we getting anywhere? And is there any sense that the judge might be releasing a preliminary report just to give a sense of where his thoughts are, having heard all this information in the past 12 months?
Well, at this stage, it's very hard to say whether that's going to happen. But of course, I think it's been an interesting 12 months of testimony, around how particular sectors, especially particular, industries as well, not industries to put it, but say departments, state departments, for example, had been captured, how SOEs, for example, had been looted, by some of those who were involved in the so-called state capture project. We
the money trains at the
names of the Guptas coming up. We had the names of, the former president himself being one of the most implicated persons to be mentioned at the State Capture Commission. So it's been a lot of evidence that has been led, and of course including this particular leg that you're looking at today, the capture or the alleged capture of the NPA. So we've had interesting witnesses, and of course you'll remember the highlight of it all being the former president Jacob Zuma giving his testimony, and certainly the media hype around his testimony. And I think a lot of South Africans watching with bated breath to hear what he's going to say at the State Capture Commission. But at this point, I think what it has done to a certain effect is that it's opened questions about some investigations. Of course, the Frida Dairy Estina project being one of them, where now we've heard that the Office of the Public Protector might now be also looking into the issue of, politicians being involved. So certainly there are other sort of charges that the NPA is also looking at with regards to these matters, and that police are also investigating as a result of some of the testimony that has been led at this commission. So there has been something that has come out of it, but of course it's still a long way to go. They have said that it might take about 2 years for it to be completed.
So let's just come back to today in Mxolisi Nxasana and expectations there.
Of course, we do expect Nxasana to continue to give more testimony on, his 17 million golden handshake that he received from the former president.
The one he says it's finished.
The one that he says he cannot pay back. He doesn't have the money to pay it back. But of course, we do expect to hear more testimony on that. And, we do know that that matter was challenged in court by Freedom Under Law as well as Corruption Watch, who said that golden handshake was unconstitutional and it was illegal for him to be paid that. And of course, we do know that the Constitutional Court did rule that he had to pay back 10 million of it.
The same Deputy Chief Justice.
The same Deputy. So we're still to hear really on what really went down when he received that golden handshake. And also we expect to hear more testimony from him with regards to Manqoba Mchunu and her involvement, and how, of course, she had been one of those who was in a campaign to target him and also to frustrate some of the high-profile investigations that were taking place at the time.
Thank you so much for your update, Manqoba Mchunu, our colleague who's on that story and will give us more updates. And of course, we'll be going there live as soon as proceedings begin there.